It's good to be back here on Apolitical with Brian Watson, my co-host. Brian, how you doing, man?
Doing pretty good, man. I'm all smiles today. Today was inauguration day, but we'll get into that a little bit later.
Yeah, the energy is strong in the country. You can feel it in the air. It feels good to be American once again. So I know we had season one. We talked about a lot of young African American politicians coming up in Arizona and across the country. I mean, this is a lot of things are moving. We've talked about some small businesses and hopefully getting a stimulus package from the Biden administration. So there's a lot of opportunities coming up. So really, really good things. But I do want to introduce somebody
Could you?
that want to come on the team and she want to talk about some issues. And it's always good to get a woman's perspective. Guy talk. We talk all day about stuff,
Listen,
but sometimes it's good to get another perspective. So I want to introduce Azra. Right, she's coming on the team. She want to talk about a lot of different things. She's very involved in the community and everything else. So I'll let her introduce herself real quickly and let her talk about some things about. So Ezra, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Certainly. Well, thank you guys. I really appreciate you all. So I'm Azra Mahmood. A little bit about me is actually I'm not from Arizona. I'm from Chicago, Illinois originally. And I am Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated member.
As we know, every good team should have an AKA on it. That's right.
Yes.
Yes.
Brought to you by the Brothers of Alpha Phi Alpha.
Oh, I love my brothers. I love the brothers. Just when about something. Love the brothers. So I pledged out of Western Kentucky University Epsilon Zeta chapter. And anyways, I've been in Arizona now almost 18 years, and I serve the South Mountain Community College and community out there. I'm a professor of communication. I've worked for Maricopa Community Colleges for ample time as well. And I come from just a diverse background from business, and it's definitely, I won't call myself savvy in politics, but I definitely am very, I would say passionate. I think that it's important to be understanding where our political climate and our nature and where we're going and just all of those types of topics. So I'm really excited to be here. So thank you for having me. Hope I add value and just very humbled to be here. Thank you.
We're lucky to have you. And here, on Apolitical, we try to elevate the conversation, right? We try to, give definition to the conversation. We try to put purpose behind what we say. We try to actually support the community and take ourselves in the community to a whole nother level. Because as we've seen the last 4 years, the African American culture, the community has to evolve to a new reality. Even though Biden and Harris administration has a lot of potential and a lot of hope, there's still a lot of challenges coming up. I know 2020 and 2020 and 2019 and 2018 and so on, back 4 years, have been a nightmare for the country, and especially the community of color, right? We saw things that, I'll be honest with you, I didn't think we'll see in our lifetimes, right? And just the transition between policy and ethics and facts and misinformation and just new rise of bigotry and prejudice and how it's been how America is now coming more into a reality of, wow, racism is really in our DNA as a country, and we really haven't addressed it, right?
You know what? I'm gonna cut you off just for a second here, right?
Okay.
And the only reason I'm saying that is what my observation is, that we've known that the country has been this bad all this time. Is that the rest of the country is just caught up, and we like, this is what we was telling you. You know what I'm saying? Why didn't you believe us?
Right.
But now we're at this crossroad now, and I think in that the reality is what it is. It's going to be hard to confront these things because it's kind of gone past levels where it can easily be addressed. Diversity and inclusion is never going to be enough. And those were the things that we would always try to apply as the Band-Aid, right? Oh, well, diversity and inclusion. Let's go ahead and Band-Aid that with that. And now it's done. But now it's time for real conversations, hard ones. And, you know, people's feelings might get hurt, but they should understand that just like in any form of therapy, you have to come to terms with those things that you made as excuses that now made you culpable as to how these things got to be so bad. You were in some essence enabling it. You know what I mean? And that's, you know, that's white folks primarily, but then Black folks have to also own some portion of this as well, because in some instances, we played along to get along. From a Black respectability standpoint, you know, we were easily prepared to compromise, and now we should be at the point there is no compromise because the truth is out there. Everybody should realize this.
Yeah, I want to piggyback on what you just said, Brian. Like, I think that it's an exciting time, right? This entire inauguration, this day has been monumental. It's been huge, and it is a huge slap in the face to the 75 million people who voted the other way that, you know, obviously felt some type of feelings in the way that this country has been indoctrinated for so long. And they didn't want that narrative to ever shift or change. And when people of color came to the polls and shifted that narrative, today is what is the essentially, you know, it's the making of what happens when you exercise your rights, right? And I really think that with everything that you just said about how like the past has really been dark and just dismal for people of color specifically, I think right now it's not only about bringing civility back into discourse, right? In order to disagree, it's okay to be civil about it and not make it so personal about everything. And then creating these divisive, the language, like the rhetoric that was used for so long over the past 4 years under the previous administration, I feel has created emboldenment, or it has really emboldened people who believe in that narrative and that belief system. And so I don't think, unfortunately, I really don't think it's gone, right? And I think right now people are feeling how we felt 4 years ago, that 75 million that didn't vote this way. And so they're salty. You know, in my area, I've seen people finally take down their signage and, you know, accept defeat. And it's not about a winning or losing in my eyes. I think it's just really about a continuation of now a better story for America. Like you said, Myron, I feel proud to be American again. Today marked a huge moment for me, my girls to watch, you know, like it was a proud moment to be in our space and time in history, to say that we're living through it. And, you know, it's not the very first time apparently someone has run of color, right? A woman. And so it's just finally that glass ceiling breaking and really allowing us to walk into it. That's why we're so proud. So
you know,
I'm just really excited.
No, and you should be. I know my nieces, they're excited. They had their pearls on, their Converse on, they Chucks. They're representing, and it's really, democracy took a major step forward today, right? I don't think we really comprehend it now because we're in the moment, but as time goes on, we're gonna see that at November of 2020, democracy was on the edge, jumping over into the cliff, into the deep unknown.
Right.
And to me, you have to also feel proud about the Black vote, how valuable that is, right? Mm-hmm. How the African American community and community in color, but definitely African American community, is really the backbone of democracy. I mean, literally. I mean, we had so many people ready to vote. We had so many people to go out and wait in lines. Even though you can mail in your vote, some people say, I'm gonna wait 10 hours with a sandwich and some Kool-Aid in my hand.
In the middle of a pandemic.
People dying around us. And also too, we want to give a shout out and prayers to families that have lost loved ones to COVID-19. Unfortunately, we passed a milestone of 400,000 and counting. So even through a pandemic, economic crisis, racial injustice, we still came through, not just for our future, but for our ancestors. And I want to repeat that, not just for our future, but for our ancestors. You know, the sacrifices that they made for us to make sure that, hey, you have opportunity to express your voice. You have opportunity to have a choice. You have opportunity to have a say in the destiny of how this country will go.
Yeah.
So I think, go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, I was just gonna say along those lines, though, you know, when you talk about the ancestors, you also have to speak to some of the elders that have kind of gave us the opportunity to know that we can assume the reins of power as a people. For the young people who are in the pipeline when it comes to politics, the mayors, the city council members, the people who are activists or community organizers. These are the folks that we should be looking to in the future as being that part of that leadership that is going to now break down the remaining barriers for not equality, right, but equity, right? At this point, the fight is not, equality is out the door. We need equity.
That's nice.
Right? And to a certain extent, right, equality should be understood by now, right? That's the 101 courses. We can't be doing this for 400 years, right? Talking about equality. It's time to move on. Whether you're ready or not, it's time to move on to now. You should understand equality. Now you're about to understand equity, right? Because all the things that have been part of creating the infrastructure of America has been at the hands, has been by our hands as African Americans or people of African descent and indigenous people and people who are from Latin American descent. And it's time that the rest of America understands that. So as people of color take the reins of power, it's power that should have been, we should have been had these opportunities, you know? And before we can get to reparations, right? We're not even talking about reparations, but as far as the sacrifices that immigrants have made, particularly people of color to this country, equity is required. It's mandatory. We're not asking you, we're telling you.
You.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I believe also too, we have a responsibility as a culture to manage that equity, right? That means we gotta get invested and involved. It shouldn't take, you know, democracy to die for everybody to jump in. Oh yeah, we gotta push the boat. We gotta push it. Well, it's on water. How we gonna push the boat, right? So we're at this. We put ourselves in a position of last minute results. But we need to manage this equity that we have, and that we know we can use by getting involved in community organizations like the NAACP, like the Urban League. I can go on and on. And even if you're involved maybe in just one or two, it makes a difference because then those organizations become loudspeakers for us, right? They become pillars that support a wall that says we won't do this. Instead of waiting last minute and getting everybody through the gates, we need to make sure those are already in place because guess what? Our ancestors put those pillars for us for these situations.
Right.
You take a look at the Urban League is over 100 years old, NAACP over 100 years old. These organizations and these entities are here for us to magnify our concerns, our needs, our wants, and our issues, right? So you're right, I agree with you. We have that equity, but also too, like anything else, you don't manage your equity effectively, it will dissipate. It will shrink.
Well, you know, I want to jump in to both what you're saying because really at the end of the day, psychological warfare has been a real thing against African American Black community from Jumpstart. I'm not even going to sugarcoat it. I'm going to call it what it is. When you talk about equity, how do you create equity when the whole structure has been about divide and conquer? So, you know, it's been working and it's been working for over 400 years within a people, within this infrastructure that we call America. So let's not get it twisted. And then you have people who come from immigrant societies and immigrant cultures that are sucked into the same story. And so I think that community involvement is stellar. It's important. It was the need was there. It needs to pivot and evolve into where youth want to be a part of it, where it can't be it can't be the same. We can't have the same status quo. We have to shift with the times. So I think there's a call to action when it comes to people leading those kind of institutions and groups, because they're important. The one thing that I heard that was really powerful over the winter break recently was out of a NPR segment. And I'm sorry, I can't quote the person, but they basically said community is something so important. And with this pandemic, we're realizing the absence of community, right? And we're creating it through these spaces of online, virtual, whatever, because we're craving that connectivity and connection. But he said, community is where people continuously show up, right? And it doesn't have to be on a grand scale. It can be small, it can be large, it's whatever you make of it. But I urge people to get out of their little comfort zones and just off of their social media, the pulpit, and do more. I want them to do more. I think, including myself, right? Like, we're all very busy, we have a lot to do, but we do need to take small steps in that right direction for 2021 to progress.
Yeah, and I think along the lines of what you're saying, and this is going back to your point as well, Myron, is that yes, these institutions that we've created have to be refreshed, right? In order for them to be able to move forward and accomplish things that we're asking them to accomplish. And it's funny, we can't ask of the Democratic Party and the Republican Party and of government things that we were not asking of ourselves, and we're not asking of these legacy or organizations that have kind of been the driving force with civil rights, because it's one of those things where we can't accomplish these goals if we not ourselves have adopted what it is that we say that we're talking about, right? So if we're talking about wanting more progressive legislation in government, we have to ask ourselves, have we attempted to become more progressive in how it is that we look at changing our community? And I think one of the first things that we have to kind of reevaluate is, what does it mean to be Black in America, right? And expand that definition to be one that is more inclusive and understanding that the diaspora, people who are of African descent, no matter where it is that you fall along those lines, and that's Afro-Latino, right? We still have to reconcile issues with that. That's from the continent. And making sure that that coalition is consistently seeing itself as us, as a group, understanding that when it comes to white supremacy, right? If America has a white supremacy problem, you have to understand that it's not just America's white supremacy problem. The globe has a white supremacy problem, right? And the civil rights that we were fighting for here, guess what? They were fighting for that in Africa and other countries. There's a shared history of struggling against white supremacy that we have to understand, that our Blackness inherently has been up against it. And the ancestors for folks in Latin America, the ancestors for folks on the continent of Africa, the ancestors of Black folks in Europe, it's the same damn story. You know what I mean? And so for me, it's something where, how do we make sure that that coalition is intact through our legacy organizations, right? And then, of course, right? Right?
No, you're right. It starts at home.
And we can't start being like, they're not from here. We're the African Americans, folks, and so they don't really understand. This fight is our fight, and you can help, but you don't know it like I know it. It's fruit of the same tree. You know what I mean? We talking about Cecil Rhodes, then we talking about the white man's burden. Well, guess what? That was something that was implemented not just in America, but deployed throughout the world.
Yeah, so very strategically.
Go ahead, right?
So very strategically, like colonialism, when you look at post-colonial effects all around the world, I'm not sure how many people know this, but like it's only 8 countries in the world. You heard me right. Only 8 countries in the world were not touched or affected by colonist or colonialism. 8. So when you talk about global, it's real.
Yeah, it is real. And, I think moving forward for 2021, there's a new era. There's a new feeling in the air, right? For what we
Yeah.
experience, and it's once in a lifetime, event that we went through 4 years ago. And before we go to our next segment here and take a break, one thing my grandmother always told me, she said, Myron, and she was really good in math, but she was great in history. But she would say something that always now echoes in my mind. She always say, Myron, if history is not learned, history will repeat itself. It's a mathematical certainty.
For
Mm.
real. For real.
So, like what you're saying, Brian, you're right. It starts with home. It starts with us talking with our children, talking to our neighbors. It starts with those conversations. And yes, the pillars that our ancestors made, such as community organization from NAACP and others, they need to be remodified and retooled for a new direction, for a new generation, for a new mindset. Because, even though it's the same theme that we're still going against, but the dialogue and content has changed. That means you got to change our vision of how we move forward and be, I guess, as an organization or as a community, whatever, we have to be able to step up to those challenges of today. Because even though Biden and Harris are, have been sworn in, there's new challenges that's coming, and I don't think we still are not prepared for them. And just because Trump is no longer in office does not mean that he just disappeared. The residue of his legacy is still going to be hovering around like a black cloud over us, right? Are we ready and are we prepared to face those challenges politically, culturally, educationally, and economically, right? And that will be our challenge in this present time for us that we are alive and above ground that we have to face. So, but let's take a little break. Let's talk about the future. I know we dread a little bit about the past. You can't change yesterday. You can learn from yesterday, but we got to focus on what we got to do for tomorrow and what's coming up. So let's take a little break, guys. We'll be back in a few. We're going to get some water, get some Kool-Aid. And after that, we'll come back and we'll talk about the future in season 2 of Apolitical.
Yo, why it gotta be Kool-Aid?
Because
Right. Matthew. That's sugar.
Hey, man,
Cheers.
we're more progressive.